Wyoming Territory, winter of 1874, snow 6 feet deep, wind that could split leather, a small settlement of 22 buildings pressed together against the dark of the mountains. Inside one of them, a saloon full of loud men and warm whiskey, a widow in a mended gray dress, sitting by the wood stove, keeping to herself the way she had kept to herself for 6 years. Then the door bangs open. Cold air rushes in like a living thing. Candles snuff out. A giant of a man stands in the frame, snow on his coat, ice in his beard, and on his cheek cutting a clean line through 3 weeks of trail dust, one single tear. He walks to the bar. His hands are shaking. He says 4 words that turn the whole room to stone. I need a wife. And somewhere up on that mountain, 7 hours from sunrise, 2 small children he has no right to keep are waiting for him to come home. The door of Duke's Post Saloon banged open so hard the hinges nearly tore loose from the frame. Cold air rushed in like a living thing. It snuffed half the candles on the tables. It sent a shiver through the room that had nothing to do with temperature. Every head turned. A mountain of a man stood in the doorway, 6'4" in his worn boots. Snow clung to his bearskin coat. Ice crusted his beard, and his eyes, gray as a January sky, moved across the room with an intensity that made grown men glance down at their whiskey. He did not step in right away. He stood there breathing hard, like he had run the 15 miles from his cabin on foot, which nobody would have believed if they had not been looking at him. Jesus Christ, somebody muttered. His name was Elias Thorne. He was 40 years old. He had lived alone in the high country for 19 years. He came down twice a year to trade pelts. He spoke to no one unless a transaction demanded it. People in Silver Creek had stories about him, most exaggerated, some true, all of them useful for keeping children from wandering too far into the pines. He was a ghost, a rumor, a caution. And on the night of January the 14th, 1874, he walked into Duke's Post Saloon and undid every story the town had ever told about him. The winter had come down on Wyoming Territory like a hammer on cold iron. Snow piled 6 feet deep in places where roads used to run. The wind carried a kind of cold that split leather. And in the little settlement of Silver Creek, 22 buildings pressed together against the dark of the mountains, people had stopped wasting words on things that did not keep them alive. Survival was not a story out here. It was a chore, repeated, endless, mean. Duke's Post was crowded that night. A supply wagon had squeezed through the pass before the last blizzard closed the road, which meant fresh whiskey, real tobacco, enough salt pork to last another month. Men crowded 3 deep at the bar. Their voices were loud. Their laughter had that sharp edge that comes off men who have dodged starvation one more time and are not sure why. Near the wood stove in the back, 3 women sat quiet, a laundress, a cook from the boarding house, and a widow named Prudence Merritt in a mended gray dress, keeping to herself the way she had kept to herself for 6 years. The bartender was a thick-necked man named Duke Halloran. He had killed a man in Denver once over a card game and had learned in the aftermath that most fights are settled by whoever refuses to be surprised. He took 1 step back from the bar anyway. Elias. Elias did not answer. He walked straight to the bar. His boots left wet, dark tracks on the plank floor. He did not sit. He stood there towering over the men on their stools. He pulled off his gloves. His hands were shaking. Duke had never in his life seen Elias Thorne's hands shake. Whiskey. His voice came out rough, like it had not been used in weeks. Maybe it had not been. Duke poured. The glass looked small as a thimble in that grip. Elias drank it in one swallow, set it down, and then he turned to face the room. I need a wife. The words fell into the noise of the saloon like stones into a frozen pond. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then somebody at the back started to laugh. That thin, nervous kind of laugh that spreads because nobody knows what else to do. A logger named Frank slapped a table. Somebody whistled. Within moments, the whole room was roaring. A wife, Frank wheezed. Elias Thorne needs a wife. What in the Sam Hill does he even remember about a wife? Did he forget what one looks like? Reckon he wants to marry his rifle. The laughter fed on itself. Chairs scraped, bottles clinked, somebody bellowed something crude, but Elias did not laugh. He stood perfectly still, his jaw locked, his eyes fixed on some point past the walls, past the whole town, on something only he could see, and the laughter began to die. One man noticed his face, then another, then a third. The silence spread across the room the way ice spreads across still water, until the only sounds were the crackling of the wood stove and the wind clawing at the windows. I need a wife before sunrise. His voice was steady now, but underneath it there was a raw thing, a desperate thing, the kind of thing you hear in a man's voice once in a lifetime and never forget. I need someone to stand beside me when the territorial judge opens his office at dawn. That's 7 hours from now. Duke leaned forward. His smile was gone. Elias, what the hell are you talking about? Elias's throat worked. For a moment, it looked like he might not answer at all, like the words might strangle him on the way up. Then he reached into his coat. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, dirty, creased, barely holding together. He set it on the bar. 3 weeks ago, I found a wagon in Redstone Canyon, broken axle, 2 people inside, dead of fever. They'd been gone maybe 2 days. He paused. His hands gripped the edge of the bar so hard his knuckles went white. Their children were still alive, a boy and a girl. Josiah is 8. Ren is 5. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the snow tapping the windows like fingers. I brought them back to my cabin, Elias said, fed them, kept them warm, figured I'd bring them to town when the pass opened up, find someone to take them in proper. He drew a breath. But then Marshal Duncan came through last week, said any man keeping orphans without a wife in the house is breaking territorial law, said if I don't have a proper household with a woman inside it, he's taking those 2 children to the orphanage in Cheyenne. Come sunrise, somebody swore softly, because everybody in Wyoming territory knew about the orphanage in Cheyenne. It was not a place where children went to find new families. It was a place where they went to disappear, worked half to death in factory contracts, shipped east in wagons, lost to a system that did not give a damn about frontier children with no last names and no future. He's coming back at dawn, Elias said. He's bringing a wagon. His voice cracked. Just once, just barely. If I don't have a wife standing beside me when he knocks on that door, he's taking Josiah and Ren, and I will never see them again. The weight of the words settled over the room like a wet blanket. Duke rubbed his face. Jesus, Elias. I know what it is. Elias cut him off. I know it's crazy. I know I've got no right to ask. But those children, they already lost everything. Their ma, their pa, everything they ever knew. His jaw worked. And I promised them. I promised them I wouldn't let anybody take them away. A single tear ran a clean line down through 3 weeks of trail dust on his cheek. That was when the room finally understood. This was not a joke. This was not some half-drunk mountain man wandering in with a wild story. This was real. Elias Thorne, the man who had survived winters that killed lesser men, who had fought off wolves and outlaws and every brutal thing this country could throw at him, was standing in front of them, broken, begging for help. Frank cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Elias, you can't just marry someone in 7 hours. That ain't how it works. I've got the license. Elias pulled another paper from his coat. Paid the clerk down at Fort Bridger last week. It's legal. All it needs is a signature, a preacher, and a woman willing to sign her name to a bad bargain. And then what? Duke said quietly. You drag some poor woman up to your cabin in the middle of winter, make her play house with 2 children she's never met and a man she doesn't know from Adam. I am not dragging anyone. Elias's voice went sharp. I'm asking. And yeah, it's a bad deal. I know that. I've got nothing to offer except a roof that doesn't leak much and more work than any one person should have to do. But I'll keep her safe. I'll work every day to make sure she doesn't regret it. He looked around the room, meeting eyes, one after another. And those children need a ma. They need somebody who knows how to be gentle. I don't know how to do that. I know how to trap and hunt and survive, but I don't know how to make a little girl stop crying in the middle of the night because she wants her mama. He drew one shaking breath. So I'm asking, I'm not too proud to beg, if there's a woman in this town willing to take a chance on a fool mountain man and 2 scared children, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she doesn't regret it. Silence. Nobody moved. The women at the back looked at each other and then looked away. It was too much, too fast, too desperate. Marriage was not something you decided in a saloon at midnight because a stranger asked nicely. Marriage out here was a life sentence. Divorce did not exist in these mountains. Walking away meant dying in the snow. Elias stood there another long moment, hope draining from his face like water from a cracked bucket. Then he nodded slowly, like he had expected this all along. Yeah, he said low. Yeah, I figured. He turned toward the door. Wait. The voice came from the back, near the stove. Quiet, steady, female. Every head turned. Prudence Merritt stood up from her chair, thin in a way that suggested too many missed meals. Dark hair pulled back tight against her skull. Her face might have been pretty once, before grief had carved lines around her mouth. Her hands were rough from years of sewing. Her dress had been mended so many times, it was hard to say what the fabric had started out as. She looked directly at Elias. You said their names are Josiah and Wren. Elias turned slowly, like he could not quite believe he had heard her. Yes, ma'am. How long have they been with you? 3 weeks. Are they sick? No, ma'am. They're healthy, eating good. Prudence took a step forward. The whole saloon watched her cross the room like she was walking through deep water. Do they know you're here? Elias hesitated. I told them I was going to town to fix things. I didn't tell them what that meant. Prudence stopped a few feet in front of him. She was tiny compared to him, barely reached his chest, but something in the way she held herself made her seem taller than she was. I need to know one thing, she said, and I need the truth, not what you think I want to hear. Yes, ma'am. Will you be kind to them? The question hung in the air. Elias's face did something complicated. Surprise, confusion, and then underneath both, something that looked almost like pain. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'll be kind." His voice was rough. "I swear to you, ma'am, I'll be kind to them. And to you. I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to be a father. But I know how to keep my word, and I am giving you my word right now. I will be kind." Prudence studied him a long moment. Whatever she saw in his face must have been enough, because she nodded once. "Then I'll marry you." The saloon exploded. Half the men shouted at once. Somebody yelled her name in a voice that meant she had lost her mind. Somebody else laughed. Somebody swore. Prudence ignored all of it. She kept her eyes on Elias. "I have 3 conditions." Elias looked like he had been hit in the back of the head with a fence post. "Anything. First, I am not your property. I will be your wife in name, and I will help raise those children. But I am not signing my life away to be somebody's servant. We are partners in this, or we are nothing. Yes, ma'am. Second, you do not touch me unless I say it is all right. I do not care what the law says about marital rights. My body is mine." Elias's face went red under his beard. He nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "Third, if those children are hurt, if they are scared or neglected or treated poorly, I am gone. I don't care if it's the dead of winter. I will walk back to this town, and you will never see me again. Those children come first, always." "They do," Elias said instant. "They will, I promise." Prudence took a breath, let it out slow, then she stuck out her hand. "Then we have an agreement." Elias stared at her hand like it was a miracle he had not earned. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took it. His massive hand swallowed hers completely, but his grip was gentle as a promise. "Thank you," he whispered. I don't even know how to." "Don't." Prudence said it quiet. "We'll figure it out as we go." Miss Adeline Fairchild had been watching from the back of the saloon the whole time. 60 years old, the seamstress of Silver Creek, she had run her little shop off the main street for the past 24 years, and she was the only person in Silver Creek that Prudence Merritt had ever called a friend. She stood up now, careful because her knees were not what they had been. She crossed the room, small, silver-haired, wearing a black wool coat that had been brushed clean but was showing its age. She stopped in front of Prudence. "Come here a minute, child." Prudence turned. Miss Adeline took her hand. Not the one Elias had just released, the other one. Turned it palm up and pressed something small and cold and metallic into it. Prudence looked down. A ring, plain gold, old, scratched, worn thin on the inside from decades of a hand that no longer wore it. "Miss Adeline, you listen to me now?" The old woman's voice was low, fierce, meant only for Prudence. "That belonged to me. My husband died 40 years ago. I was your age when it happened. I have kept that ring in a wooden box on my mantle for 4 decades, waiting. Waiting for what? For a woman brave enough to live again. I did not have the strength when I was where you are. I stayed a widow. I built my shop. I did my work. I made a life. But I have never once in 40 years said yes to anything the way you just said yes." Prudence's eyes filled. Not the polite kind of tears that a woman blinks back in public. The real kind. The kind that hurt on the way up. I don't know if I can do this." "You already did. The hard part is already behind you." Miss Adeline closed Prudence's fingers around the ring. You put that on when he puts a paper in front of you to sign, and you remember you are not the first woman in this town who ever picked herself up off the ground. You will not be the last. But tonight you are one of us. And Prudence Merritt, who had not wept in a public place in 6 years, wept, not loud, not with sound, just 2 tears that ran down her face, and then no more. Miss Adeline squeezed her hand, turned to Elias, looked him up and down, reached up. She was so short her hand barely reached his chest. She tapped his sternum with one bony finger. "You, mountain man." "Ma'am, that woman is the finest human being in this town, and until tonight, nobody was fool enough to see it. You are getting a gift you do not deserve. You will spend the rest of your life earning her. Do you understand me?" Elias, 6'4", ex-scout veteran of 19 winters, alone in the high country, looked down at Miss Adeline Fairchild and swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She patted him once on the chest and walked away. Duke sent a boy for Reverend Coleman. The Reverend was a wizened old man who had married half the couples in Silver Creek and buried the other half. He came in shaking snow off his hat and muttering under his breath about the hour. He took one look at the situation, sighed the sigh of a man who had seen worse, and dug his marriage register out of his bag. "You're both fools," he muttered as he opened the book, "but I've seen worse reasons to get married. At least you're doing it for the little ones." Prudence went to the boarding house where she rented her room and packed her things into a single canvas bag. It did not take long. One change of clothes, her sewing kit, her mother's leather-bound Bible with the ribbon in it, the only thing she still had from her first marriage. She stood in the middle of that tiny room and looked at the walls she had stared at for 3 years and felt absolutely nothing, because that room had never been home. Home had died 6 years ago with her husband Isaac and with her infant daughter Ellen, both taken by cholera in the same terrible week. This little rented room had just been the place where she waited to figure out how to die politely. But those children, Josiah and Wren, they were alive. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. When she walked back into Duke's post, Elias was standing at the bar with the Reverend. He had tried to clean himself up, brushed the snow out of his beard, straightened his coat. It did not help much. He still looked like a piece of the mountain had walked in and put on human clothing. Their eyes met across the room. She walked forward, stood beside him. Reverend Coleman opened his book. "Let's make this quick. I'm too old to be up this late." The ceremony was 5 minutes long. No flowers, no music, no guests but Duke, Miss Adeline, and 2 drunks passed out in a corner. Elias repeated the vows in a voice so quiet Prudence had to lean in to hear him. When it came her turn, her voice was steady. She was not afraid. Fear required hope, and she had run out of that a long time ago. When it came time to say her name in front of God and Reverend Coleman, she said it clear, "Prudence Merritt." And when it came time to sign the paper, she slid Miss Adeline's ring onto her finger. Elias watched her do it. He did not say a word, but something moved behind his eyes. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Coleman said. He looked at Elias. "You can kiss the bride if that's a thing you're planning to do." Elias looked at Prudence, panicked. Prudence shook her head once. "We are skipping that part." "Suits me," the Reverend said. He signed. They signed. Miss Adeline signed as witness in a hand that was surprisingly firm. The Reverend pressed his wax seal into the corner of the certificate. He handed it to Elias. Congratulations. Try not to kill each other. They left Silver Creek an hour before dawn. The snow had stopped, but the cold was vicious. Prudence rode behind Elias on his big roan gelding, her arms wrapped around the barrel of his ribs, her cheek pressed against the fur of his coat because her face had gone numb inside the first mile. She kept her hands folded flat against his chest. She could feel his heart beating through the layers of leather and wool, steady, slow, like a drum a long way off. He did not speak. She did not either, because there were no words she could think of that would fit. The trail climbed steadily up into the mountains. It wound through pine forests so thick the snow barely reached the ground. She had never in her life been this far from town. She had heard the stories, trappers who went mad from the loneliness, wolves that smelled fear on a rider, winters so cruel that people froze to death in their own cabins with the fires still going. She wondered briefly if she had made the worst mistake of her life, but then she thought, if it is a mistake, it is the first mistake I have made on purpose in 6 years, and I am tired of not making my own mistakes. Almost there, Elias said. His voice startled her. How much farther? Another mile. Are you all right? I'm fine. He did not push. They rode on. The cabin appeared suddenly in a clearing surrounded by tall pines, bigger than she had expected, solid, built from thick logs. A stone chimney was leaking smoke up into the gray morning sky. A little barn stood near it. She could see a chicken coop, a wood pile stacked high enough to last 2 winters. A creek ran along the edge of the clearing, half frozen, the water black underneath the ice. Elias brought the horse to a stop, dismounted, reached up to help her down. She let him. Her legs had gone dead from the ride. Wait here, he said. Let me talk to them first. He walked to the cabin door, opened it. Careful. She heard a small voice inside, high, frightened. Where were you? You said you'd be back before I woke up. I know, Josiah. I'm sorry. What came up? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Nothing. Everything is fine now. Better than fine. A pause. Why are you smiling? You never smile. Elias let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Because I brought somebody home with me. Somebody who is going to help us. Prudence took a breath and walked toward the door. When she stepped inside, 2 pairs of eyes locked on her. The boy, small for 8, dark hair sticking up like it had been slept on wrong, eyes far too old for his face. He stood in front of a little girl with tangled blonde hair and a smudged face who could not have been more than 5. They both wore clothes too big for them, salvaged most likely from their mother's and father's trunk. They looked terrified. Who is that? Josiah said. He moved slightly, putting his small body between Prudence and his sister. This is Prudence, Elias said. His voice went gentle. She is my. He paused, like the next word tasted strange on his tongue. She is my wife. We got married last night. Josiah's face went through 3 emotions at once: confusion, disbelief, anger. You got married. I had to. You can't just find a wife. That's not how it works. Well, I did, and now she's here, and when the Marshal comes today, he will see that we are a proper household, and he will leave you and Wren alone. Josiah stared at Prudence like a snake had slithered in through the door. We don't need her, Josiah. We don't. We're fine. You and me and Wren, we are fine. We are not fine. Elias said it low. You know we are not. I am doing the best I can, but it isn't enough. Ren needs. He struggled for the word. She needs somebody who knows how to be a ma. And you need that too, even if you don't think you do. I don't need anything. Josiah's voice went fierce. His eyes filled, but he blinked hard. And Ren doesn't either. We don't need some stranger coming in here pretending to care about us. The words hit Prudence harder than she was prepared for. She had known this would not be easy, but seeing this child, this boy of 8, standing there raw and terrified, arms out to protect his sister from her cracked something open in her chest that she had welded shut 6 years ago. She crouched, slowly, bringing herself down to his height. You're right. Josiah blinked. What? You're right. I am a stranger, and I am not your ma. I am not going to pretend to be. Her voice was steady. I am here because Elias asked me to help, and I said yes, not because I need anything from you, not because I think I can replace what you lost, but because sometimes people need help, and sometimes other people are willing to give it. Josiah's jaw worked. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Prudence thought about that for a moment, about her own daughter cold in the ground for 6 years now, about the empty rooms afterward, about the way she had spent every day since just waiting to figure out how to stop hurting. Because I know what it's like to lose everything, she said. And I know what it's like when nobody helps. Silence. Ren, who had been peeking out from behind her brother, edged forward. Her huge blue eyes stayed fixed on Prudence. Are you nice? Prudence felt something twist in her chest. I try to be. Do you know how to make pancakes? Prudence almost smiled. I do. Papa Elias doesn't know how to make pancakes. He tries, but they taste like wood. They do not, Elias protested, weakly. They do. Josiah quiet from behind her. They really do. Prudence stood. Then I guess I should make breakfast. And after that we will figure out what happens next. All of us. Together. She looked at Elias. That is how this works, isn't it? We figure it out together. Elias nodded. Something like relief washed across his face. Yeah, he said. Together. Marshal Duncan came up the trail 2 hours later, just as the sun was breaking over the ridge to the east. A hard-faced man, late 50s, a badge pinned to his coat, a wagon waiting behind him at the edge of the clearing. He knocked on the cabin door like he was hoping to break it down. Elias opened it. Prudence stood beside him. One hand rested lightly on Ren's small shoulder. Josiah stood on Elias's other side, his face set in a scowl that would have looked comical on a boy his age if it had not been so genuine. Duncan looked at them a long moment. His eyes lingered on Prudence. This your wife? Yes, sir. Got proof. Elias handed him the marriage certificate. Duncan studied it carefully. Looking for a forgery, he found none. Reverend Coleman's wax seal was clear. Married last night? Yes, sir. That's convenient. It's legal, Prudence said quiet. I'm here of my own free will, and these children are being cared for. That's what the law requires, isn't it? Duncan's eyes narrowed. You sure about this, ma'am? You know what you are signing up for out here. I'm sure. He did not look convinced, but he did not have a leg to stand on either. Elias had done exactly what he had been told to do. Marshal Duncan folded the certificate and handed it back. Fine, but I'll be checking in from time to time if I hear these children are being mistreated. They won't be, Elias said, firm. Duncan gave him a long, hard look. Then he tipped his hat to Prudence. Ma'am. He turned, walked back to his wagon, climbed up, snapped the reins, disappeared down the trail. When the sound of the wagon had faded completely, Josiah let out a breath he had been holding for what looked like a full 10 minutes. "Is he gone?" Wren whispered. "He is gone," Elias said. Wren looked up at Prudence. "Does that mean you're staying?" Prudence looked down at the little girl, at the tangled hair, at the too big dress, at the eyes that held hope and terror in equal parts. She thought about the empty little room back in Silver Creek, about the life that had not really been a life, about the slow, grinding emptiness of just existing to exist. And then she thought about pancakes. "Yes," Prudence said, soft. "I'm staying." For the first time in 6 years, Prudence Merritt smiled. It was not much, but it was a start. The first day nearly broke her. The cabin was not filthy. Not exactly. It was the kind of place kept by a man who knew how to keep himself alive, but did not know how to keep a house. Dishes in a bucket, clothes in a corner where clean and dirty had gotten confused, the floor unswept, the windows so grimy she could not see the mountains through them. She rolled up her sleeves. Josiah stood at the door watching her, not helping, not speaking, just watching, cataloging. Wren, on the other hand, followed her like a shadow, asking about every jar, every hook, every scrap of cloth, wanting to touch, wanting to know, wanting a mother, any mother, or something that looked enough like one to make the ache of the real one bearable. Prudence let her. She did not pretend. She did not overreach. She did not sweep the child into her arms and promise her a new life. She just answered every question, slowly, patient. And when Wren, tired of following and sat down in a corner with a corn-husk doll that looked like it had been made by a mountain man who had never seen a doll in his life, Prudence let her play. She scrubbed dishes until her hands bled, small red cracks from the cold water. She swept the floor. She boiled the children's bedding outside in a pot over a fire that Josiah, without saying a word, came out and helped her start. He handed her kindling. He did not look at her, but he handed her kindling. That evening, when Elias came in from checking his traps, red-cheeked and shaking snow off his coat, he stopped inside the door. He looked around. He looked at the swept floor, at the clean windows that let in the last of the daylight, at the stacked shelves, at the pot bubbling on the stove. He looked at Prudence. "Did you?" He gestured, helpless. "Did you do all this today?" "Somebody had to." I don't. Take off your boots and wash your hands. Supper is almost ready." That night, long after the children were asleep, Prudence walked past their little side room to check on them one more time before she went to bed herself. She found Josiah's blanket on the floor. She bent to pick it up, and her foot brushed something under the edge of his straw-tick mattress. She hesitated. She should not, except she had promised herself she would be careful with these children, which meant knowing what they carried, what they hid, what they were afraid of, not to control, but to understand. She lifted the mattress an inch. A small book slid out. Leather, very old. It had belonged, she guessed, to his mother. The cover was worn soft as skin. She opened it. It was full of drawings. Pencil, some in charcoal hasty. Every page was the same subject. His mother sitting, his mother cooking, his mother holding baby Wren, his mother laughing, page after page, day after day, drawings so tender that Prudence had to sit down on the floor to look at them. Toward the back of the book, the drawing shifted. 2 figures now, his mother still, but also a large man, a rough one, broad-shouldered, a dark beard, Elias. Josiah had been drawing Elias over the last 3 weeks, adding him, careful, uncertain, as a member of the family that the boy was trying to rebuild in ink because his real one had been ripped out of his hands. She turned to the very last page, and her breath went out of her. 3 figures, Elias, standing at the edge, big and dark. Josiah himself, small in the middle, Ren beside him, and a 4th figure, a woman, standing next to Elias, but her face was blank. Not left blank, the way an unfinished drawing is left blank. Blank on purpose, a careful oval, 2 dots for where eyes would go, a soft line for a mouth, waiting. He had been drawing her before she got here. He had left the space. He had been hoping in his small, terrified, guarded 8-year-old way that somebody would arrive to fill it. Prudence closed the book, careful, slid it back under his mattress exactly the way she had found it. She walked out of the children's room, past Elias asleep by the stove, wrapped in blankets on the floor, past the fire that had burned down to embers. She opened the cabin door and stepped out into the terrible cold of the mountain night. She stood in the doorway. The sky was black. The stars were sharp and close the way they only were up this high. She could see her breath. She had come here tonight with a plan. She had not told anyone. She had not told Miss Adeline. She had not told God. She had not even said the words out loud to herself. But she had known. She had come to that saloon tonight to have one last drink in a place where people would not stop her, to take enough of a bottle up to her tiny room and to lay down in the snow of the alley behind the boarding house and not wake up. She had picked the coldest night of the winter for it on purpose. She had left her rent paid up. She had left a small tin cup with $2 in it on her pillow. She had made her plans neat, because that was the kind of woman she was. She had been trying for 6 years to make her death the same tidy, quiet arrangement her life had become. But then a mountain man had walked in and asked for a wife, and she had asked him one question, and a little girl had asked her if she knew how to make pancakes, and now she stood on a porch in the mountains at 3 in the morning and looked up at the stars and understood for the first time in 6 years that she was not going to die tonight, that she was going to have to figure out how to live tomorrow instead, which was in some ways much harder. She held her hand up in front of her. Miss Adeline's ring caught the starlight, old gold, scratched, warm on her finger even in the cold air. A ring worn thin from the hand of a woman who had loved a man for a long time and lost him and kept going for 40 more years without him. Prudence Merritt looked at that ring on her hand, and she thought, well, I guess we are going to try. She went back inside. Quiet. She closed the door. She banked the fire back up so that Elias would not freeze on the floor. She looked at him for a moment as he slept. This stranger who was now her husband, this mountain of a man who had wept in a saloon because he loved 2 children who were not his own. She thought, I do not know you. I do not know if I ever will. But you kept your word to those children, and that is a start. She went to bed. She did not cry. She did not pray. She lay in the dark and she listened to the wind move through the pines, and somewhere out there in the darkness, past the barn and past the creek and past the frozen line of the trees, something wild called once and was answered. And Prudence Merritt, widow of Isaac, mother of Ellen, who was in the ground, now wife to a man she had known for less than 8 hours, and stepmother to 2 orphans she had known for less than 3, closed her eyes, and she thought, "Tomorrow I will make them pancakes," and she slept. Outside the cabin, snow began to fall again, gentle now, not the killing kind, the soft, forgiving kind. It covered the tracks the Marshal's wagon had left. It covered the trail down to Silver Creek. It covered the little wood pile and the barn roof and the fresh boot prints of a woman who had gone out on the porch to decide whether to live and had come back in with her decision made. By morning, everything would look new, which was of course a lie the snow told, but it was a kind lie. And Prudence Merritt, sleeping for the first night in 6 years in a house that held living children, needed a kind lie the way a starving woman needs bread. The mountain kept its silence. The stars wheeled overhead, and down in Silver Creek, in a small room above a seamstress's shop, an old woman named Adeline Fairchild lay awake in the dark with her hand over her heart, because she had given away tonight the only thing she had left of the husband she had lost 40 years ago, and she was not sad about it, not sad at all. She was smiling in the dark, because she had waited a very long time to see one of her own kind of women stand up. And tonight, one had. Spring came late that year. The snow held on into April. The creek stayed frozen until the middle of May. And in the little cabin above Silver Creek, 4 people who had not chosen each other kept figuring out how to live in the same rooms. Elias slept by the stove. Every night, on the floor, wrapped in 3 blankets, his rifle propped against the wall within arm's reach, the way a mountain man always kept it. He never once asked if he could move. He never once complained about his back. He never even suggested it in passing. Prudence noticed, because that kind of promise kept for 100 nights running is a different thing than a promise made in a saloon. She noticed the other things too, the way he came in from the trap line and took his boots off outside the door so he would not track snow on the floor she had scrubbed, the way he had, without saying anything about it, sanded down the rough edges on the table where Wren might scrape her fingers, the way he sat by the fire in the evenings whittling. Whittling what? She could not tell at first. Then one evening in late March, Wren came out of the children's room in her nightgown and stopped dead, because on the little 3-legged stool by her bed, where nothing had been the night before, sat a wooden doll, not a cornhusk doll, a real one, carved from a single piece of pine, a dress etched into the wood, 2 little braided lines for hair, a face, a tiny careful face. Wren picked it up. She held it to her chest. She looked at Elias across the room. He was pretending to look at the fire. "Papa, Elias." Did you? Just something I whittled. It's nothing." "It is not nothing." Wren walked to him, serious, barefoot on the plank floor. "What is her name?" Elias's mouth opened, closed. I don't know. That's for you to decide. She is your doll." Wren looked at the doll, then at him, then at the doll again. "Her name is Papa." Prudence at the sink with her hands in dishwater stopped moving. Elias, veteran of 19 mountain winters, ex-scout killer of wolves, and worse, went absolutely still. "You don't want to name her after your ma." "Ma is in heaven. Papa Elias is here." She walked back to her room, clutching the doll, serious as a judge, as if she had not just remade the earth on her way past. Elias sat by the fire for a long time after that. He did not whittle. He did not move. He stared into the flames like they had asked him a question he did not know how to answer. Prudence dried the last dish, set it on the shelf, walked past him. "Good night, Elias." "Prudence." "Yes." He did not look up. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not laughing at me just now." She stood there a moment, then she put her hand briefly on his shoulder. It was the first time she had touched him since the day he shook her hand in Duke's Post. His shoulder was warm through the wool, solid as a beam. "Good night, Elias." She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time, because Wren had said Papa is here, and that was true. But something else was also true, something that had begun weeks ago and was still spreading, slow, like water finding the low places in a floor. Miss Adeline came up the trail once a month. She was too old. Everyone told her to be riding a mule up a mountain in the snow. She did not listen to everyone. She brought books. She brought thread. She brought oranges once in February that had come by rail from California, and Wren cried the first time she tasted one because she had forgotten what fruit tasted like. She brought news. Cyrus Blackwood bought the Fenton place. She said it one afternoon in April, cutting a piece of thread with her teeth. She was hemming a new dress for Wren, blue calico. Wren was watching from the floor, adoring. Prudence looked up from her mending. "Who?" "Cyrus Blackwood. Man owns half the timber lease from here to the North Fork. He has been buying up land on the west slope for 3 years. The Fentons made it 2 winters, then they couldn't. He gave them a price. They took it. They are gone." "Gone where?" "Wagon east, to try again." Miss Adeline shook her head. "He does not raise cattle. He does not run timber on the land he buys. He just holds it, which means he is waiting for something." "Water." Elias from the doorway taking his coat off. Miss Adeline looked at him. "Say again." "He is waiting for water. Every parcel Blackwood has picked up runs a creek or springs. He is buying water. The land is nothing. He wants the streams." Miss Adeline nodded slow. "You may be right. I know I'm right. My place has the best year-round spring on this side of the ridge. He rode past here twice last summer, slow, looking. He did not think I noticed." Prudence set her mending down. "Elias, he has not come to the door yet." "But he will. He will." Miss Adeline began stitching again, small, careful stitches. She did not look up. "Then you have some time to prepare, which is more than the Fentons had, which is more than most had." She let a beat pass. Then she added, "I have known Cyrus Blackwood for a long time, longer than most people in this town realize. If he comes to your door, you come to my shop. You understand me. You come to my shop." She did not say more. Elias looked at Prudence. Prudence looked at Miss Adeline. Miss Adeline said nothing further and would not be pressed. Wren, on the floor oblivious, made her wooden doll dance across the boards. The doll's name was Papa. 2 days later, Wren spiked a fever. It came fast, the way frontier fevers did. She was warm at breakfast. By lunch, her cheeks were flaming. By evening, she was crying and could not stop, and her small body was shaking, and the shaking was not just the shaking of a child crying. It was the shaking of a child whose fire had climbed too high. Prudence held her. That night, all night, in the rocking chair by the stove, Wren curled up against her chest, Prudence's hand on her forehead, then in a bowl of snowmelt, then back on her forehead, then in the snow, then back, over and over, trying to draw the fever down. Josiah sat on the floor by them. He had not slept either. He did not offer to. He just sat there, his back against the wall, his eyes on his sister. "She is going to be all right." Prudence said it soft. "How do you know?" "I don't." She did not lie to him, not even to comfort him. "But I am here, and I am going to keep her cool, and in the morning we will see." Josiah's throat worked. "Ma had a fever at the end." "I know, sweetheart. She said she was going to be all right too." Prudence had no answer for that, except, by 4 in the morning, the fever had climbed higher, and Prudence knew, the way any woman who has lost a child knows, that snow was not going to be enough. She lifted her eyes to the ceiling, not because there was help up there, because she needed a second to steady her voice before she said what she had to say. "Elias?" He was already up. He had been sitting by the door watching them for hours. "Yes, there's a doctor in Silver Creek. Dr. Halley. He drinks, but he keeps decent medicines. There is a bark tea, willow bark and something else. My mother used it when I was small. My mother's cousin. She was a healer. She used it. It broke fevers when nothing else would. Dr. Halley will have it, or he will know where to send you." "How far?" 15 miles down, 15 back. In this weather. In this weather. Elias was already pulling on his coat. "Elias, yes, there is a storm. I know, there is a bad storm. I know." He put his rifle on his back. He tied his scarf up over his mouth. He picked up his gloves. "Elias, Prudence, come back." He stopped, his hand on the door. He turned. He looked at her. His eyes over the wool of the scarf were very quiet. "I will come back." He opened the door. The cold slammed in like a fist. He stepped out. The door shut. She heard the horse. She heard the horse leave. Then she heard nothing but wind. She sat there, Wren in her arms, Josiah on the floor, and she watched the fire, because that was all she could do, and because she could not let herself think about her husband on a mountain trail in a blizzard with 15 miles between him and safety, which she thought about anyway, constantly, for 9 hours. He came back at 1 in the afternoon. The storm was still going. He nearly did not make the last quarter mile up the trail. His horse was in a bad way. He was in a worse way. He staggered through the door. His beard was solid ice. His eyebrows were white. His hands were the color of old candle wax, and he could not close them around the little paper package inside his coat. So Prudence had to pry his fingers open, one at a time, to get it. Willow bark, and feverfew, and a small square of camphor, and a note in Dr. Halley's scrawl. Boil the bark, 1 teaspoon per cup, hourly. Elias. He was on the floor by the stove. He was not answering. His eyes were open, but he was not answering. Josiah was already at the woodpile. "More wood," Prudence said. "Sharp. Yes. Bring the blankets, all of them, from my bed, from your bed, all of them." "Yes." She stripped Elias of his frozen coat, of his boots, of the wool shirt underneath that had frozen against his skin. She wrapped him in every blanket in the cabin. She built the fire up until the stove glowed. She boiled the willow bark tea for Wren. She spoon-fed it tiny sip by tiny sip into a 5-year-old mouth. She turned back to Elias. She sat on the floor beside him. She took his terrible cold hand between her 2 hands. She rubbed his hand for an hour, then the other one, then his forearms, then his feet. She had never in 6 years touched a man this much. She had in fact promised in a saloon that she would not, but this was not that. This was. This was a woman trying to bring her husband back from the edge of dying, which was, it turned out, a different thing altogether. By evening, the color came back into his face. By full dark, he was breathing even. By midnight, Wren's fever broke, and the child slept, and Prudence, for the first time in 28 hours, closed her eyes. She did not go to her bed. She stayed on the floor, sitting up, her back against the leg of the table. Elias wrapped in blankets beside her, Wren asleep in her arms, Josiah asleep on his side, one hand on his sister's foot, keeping contact even in sleep. She sat there in the firelight and looked at her family. Her family. The word came into her head so simply, so casually, without warning. Family. She did not push it away. She did not have the strength. Elias woke sometime near dawn. He turned his head. He looked at her. She was still awake, still on the floor, still holding Wren. Prudence, I'm here. You are on the floor. So are you. Yes. A pause. Wren. Fever broke. He closed his eyes. Something in his face let go. Elias? Yes. I have to tell you something. He waited. She stared into the fire. The night you came into that saloon. Yes. I had come there to have a last drink. He did not move. He did not answer. She kept going, because if she stopped, she would not start again. I had $2 in my room. Rent was paid up. I had a place picked out, behind the boarding house. The alley. I had my mother's Bible in my bag with a note in it that said, "Do not tell my sister in Iowa." I did not want her to know how her sister ended. Elias closed his eyes again, but not from fatigue, from something else. I had picked the coldest night on purpose, so it would not take long, so somebody would find me in the morning, and it would just be done. No fuss, no mess. Tidy. That was the last tidy thing I was going to do. She was crying now. She had not meant to. She did not brush the tears away because she did not have a free hand. Then you came in. Prudence. And I did not save you, Elias. I need you to know that. I did not walk over to that bar to be a savior. I walked over because you were the first person in 6 years who looked more broken than I did, and I could not stand it. I could not stand watching a man cry in public because I knew what he was crying for. Silence. The fire snapped. You saved me, she said. You did not know. You still did not know until this second, but you did. You walked into a saloon and asked for a wife, and I said yes because I had nowhere else to go, not because I was brave, because I was tired. Elias reached out. His hand came out slow from under the blankets, big, warm now, human again. He did not touch her. He held his hand palm up in the space between them. An offer. She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She freed one of her arms gentle from underneath Wren. She laid her hand in his. He closed his fingers around it, not hard, not possessive, just holding. He did not speak. He did not have to. They sat like that for a long time. The fire burned down. The room got quiet. Josiah slept. Wren slept. And Prudence Merritt, who had come out of Silver Creek to die and had ended up on a mountain instead, sat on a plank floor in the dark, holding her husband's hand. She thought, well, some marriages start in a church, some start in a saloon, and some apparently start on a floor. Cyrus Blackwood came up the trail on a Thursday in June. He had 3 sons with him. The oldest was Vincent, 22, tall, yellow-haired, handsome in a way that made you not trust him. The middle one was Emmett, 19, big-shouldered like his brother but slower behind the eyes. The youngest was Rafe, 17, small, jumpy, the kind of boy who laughed at his brother's jokes half a beat late. Blackwood himself was 60, silver hair, a face that had been used to getting its way for so long that it had settled into a permanent expression of amused patience. He rode a bay horse worth more than the cabin. He tipped his hat when he saw Prudence in the doorway. Mrs. Thorne. Prudence did not know how he knew her name, which was the point. Mr. Blackwood. Ah, then my reputation precedes me. It does. He smiled. He liked that. Your husband home. He is coming up from the creek. I will wait. He waited, on horseback, in the middle of the yard, his 3 sons behind him spread out, not quite in a line, but almost. Rifles across the saddles, casual. Elias came up from the creek with a string of trout, saw them, slowed, set the fish down on the porch, wiped his hands on his trousers. Blackwood. Mr. Thorne, I have come to make you an offer. On my land, on your land, I am not selling. You have not heard the offer. I do not need to. Blackwood smiled, very small. That is the second thing I like about you. The first is that you have kept this cabin tidy, which speaks to a certain kind of pride in ownership. Blackwood. $1,600, Mr. Thorne, cash, this week. You can be in Oregon Territory by August. Prudence from the doorway did the arithmetic. $1,600 was more money than any of them would see in 10 years of trapping. It was buy a farm money, start over money, not freeze next winter money. Elias did not blink. I am not selling, Mr. Blackwood. 2,000, not selling. Blackwood's smile did not change, but something behind his eyes went a little quieter. You have children, I understand. Prudence stepped out onto the porch. Blackwood did not look at her. He kept his eyes on Elias, which was another thing he did on purpose. Sir? He looked at her polite. Yes, Mrs. Thorne. You have said what you came to say. My husband has answered. You have a long ride down. Ma'am, I mean no disrespect. I only observe that the winters up here are hard on children, and that $2,000 would set them up considerably better than a cabin above a creek. He said no. I heard him say no. Then I do not know what else there is to discuss. Blackwood tipped his hat again. Nothing, nothing at all. I only wanted to make certain that you both understood the offer, so there could be no confusion later, should conditions change. Conditions. Winter comes early sometimes. Barns burn, wells go bad, children fall sick. Life on a mountain is uncertain, ma'am. I would hate to see your family unprepared. Elias took one step forward, just one. Blackwood's oldest son, Vincent, shifted his rifle, very slightly, meaningfully. Prudence on the porch quiet said, Mr. Blackwood, take your sons home. Ma'am, take them home. He held her eye for a moment. He was measuring, not her, something behind her, the set of Elias's shoulders, the angle of the sun, the distance to the trees, the math of a man who did not lose fights and did not intend to start one today, because today was for planting a seed. He nodded once. Good afternoon, Mrs. Thorne. He turned his horse. His sons turned theirs. They rode down the trail. They were not in a hurry. Elias did not move until they were out of sight. Then he came up onto the porch. He did not look at Prudence. He looked at the trees where they had disappeared. That was a threat. Yes, you called it. I did. Prudence. I have known men like him. My first husband's brother was a man like him. That is a man who does not lose. That is a man who will come back." Elias was quiet. Then Miss Adeline said, "If he came, to go to her." "Yes." "Why?" "I don't know. You are going to town. Not without you." "Prudence!" "Not without you, Elias." He looked at her a long moment. All right. But something small went across his face, something she had not seen there before. Not fear, not anger, trust. 3 weeks passed. Blackwood did not come back, which was worse in some ways than if he had. Elias kept a rifle by the door now, and one under the wagon seat, and Josiah, at 9, was suddenly a boy who knew how to load a Winchester and did not think that was strange. Wren at 6 could tell you the difference between the sound of a strange horse and Papa Elias's horse from a quarter-mile away. Families adjust, especially small families high in the mountains whose whole security is the 4 walls they can see. Then one afternoon, Vincent Blackwood was down at the creek, alone. He had a fishing pole. He had a story ready in case anyone asked. He had, more importantly, a message. Josiah was there. Josiah, who was not supposed to be near the creek alone, but was 9 and had a boy's memory for rules. Vincent found him. Vincent had a soft voice. He knew how to use it. "You must be Josiah." Josiah did not answer. "Little sister at home." Josiah stood up, slow, set his pole down, ready to run. "You do not need to run, boy. I am not going to hurt you." Vincent smiled. His teeth were very white. "I just want to tell you a thing, and I want you to think about it." "All right." Josiah did not answer. "That woman up in your cabin, that widow, she is not your ma." "I know." "No, I do not think you do, because I do not think anybody has been honest with you. That woman came out of Silver Creek because she had nothing, because nobody wanted her. Do you know what a woman like that does when something better comes along?" Josiah did not answer. "She leaves, boy. She leaves. She left one husband already. Did you know that? Ask her. Go home and ask her about the husband and the baby that she left behind. Go on. Ask her." He was lying. Prudence had not left them. They had died. Cholera. 6 years ago. Vincent Blackwood knew that. He was betting a 9-year-old would not. He won that bet. "So when winter comes," Vincent said, soft, almost kind, "and things get hard, and that pretty ring on her finger starts to look small, she is going to walk out of that cabin and back down that trail, and you will never see her again, and you will be right back where you started, you and your baby sister, alone." Josiah's face did not move. He was very still. "Unless," Vincent leaned in, "unless what?" "Unless your papa listens to reason. About the land, if your papa takes my father's offer, everybody gets to Oregon. Everybody lives someplace warm. Nobody has to worry about that woman leaving in a snowstorm, because nobody has to be here at all." Vincent stood. He tipped an imaginary hat. "You have a good day, Josiah, and you think about what I said. You are the man of the family right now, not that man up at the cabin. You have got the little girl to think about. You get to decide. You go home and think about it." He picked up his pole. He walked off along the creek, whistling. Josiah walked home slowly, then faster, then he ran. He got to the cabin door and did not go in. He stood outside for a long time. Prudence saw him through the window. She did not go out. She did not call. She waited. When he finally came in, he did not look at her. He walked past her. He walked past Wren, who was drawing on the floor with a piece of charred stick, and did not look up. He went to the little side room where he and Wren slept. He shut the door. Prudence set down the shirt she had been mending. She sat there a full minute. She thought, do not go in there yet, because whatever it is, if you go in too fast, he will slam the door shut inside his own head. She waited 15 minutes. She stood up. She walked to the door of the children's room. She knocked. Once. Josiah, nothing. Josiah, sweetheart, may I come in? Nothing. She opened the door anyway. He was on his bed. His small canvas bag was open next to him. He had already put things in it. His mother's book of drawings, a small tin cup, 2 pairs of socks, a folding knife Elias had given him. He was staring down at the bag. He had been about to run. Prudence sat down on the floor, so she was lower than him, so her eyes had to look up at his eyes. Where were you going? Nowhere. You had your bag. I was just... Josiah. Her voice did not rise. Josiah, look at me. He looked. His eyes were wet, but he was not crying. He was in fact doing that terrible thing children do when they refuse to cry and their whole small face turns into a fortress against the tears. Somebody said something to you. Silence. Vincent Blackwood. His face flinched. Yes. What did he say? I don't. Josiah, what did he say? He said, he could not, he tried. He said, take your time. He said you left. He said you had a husband and a baby, and you left them. He said when winter comes, you are going to leave us too, because we are not yours. He said, Wren, his voice cracked. He said, Wren is not yours, and she is going to be too much, and you are going to go, and it will just be us again. Prudence closed her eyes. For one long moment she did nothing but breathe, because if she said the first thing that came to her mouth, it would be a sentence about Vincent Blackwood, so black it would burn a hole through the floor. Instead, she opened her eyes. She reached out, not to grab him. She held out her hand palm up, the same way Elias had held out his hand to her in the dark. An offer. Josiah stared at the hand. He did not take it, but he did not pull his own away. Sweetheart. She kept her hand where it was. Vincent Blackwood is a liar. Silence. I did have a husband. His name was Isaac. He was a school teacher in Missouri. We had a little girl. Her name was Ellen, and they both got cholera in the same terrible week when Ellen was 6 months old, and they both died in our little house in 2 days. Josiah's eyes stayed on her. I did not leave them. They left me, and it is a very small thing to say, but it matters, because the man who told you that story wanted you to think I was a woman who leaves. I am not. How? His voice was small. How do I know? Prudence's chest ached at the question, because it was the fair question. It was the only question a child who had already lost everybody could ask. You don't. She said it plain. You do not know, Josiah. You cannot know, because I could still leave. I could. I am a grown woman. I have my own feet. Any day I choose, I could put on my coat and walk out that door. That is true, and it will always be true. His face crumpled. She held her hand steady. But, Josiah, listen to me. He listened. I am not going to. He did not move. I am not going to, and I know you do not have any reason to believe me yet, and that is all right. You do not have to believe me, but I am going to be here tomorrow, and the day after, and a month from now, and a year, And every time you look up and I am still here, that is a piece of proof. And someday, one day, you will have collected enough pieces of proof, and you will look up and you will know. How long? How long what? How long? Until I know. She thought about the honest answer. Years, probably. He almost smiled, just at the corner. Almost. But if you do decide to run, she said before then, I want you to know something. What? I am going with you. He blinked. What? Wherever you go. If you have to go, I go. If you and Ren decide to leave in the middle of the night and take a train east and try to find your grandmother in Ohio, I am on that train. If you decide to run to the coast and become a sailor, I am on that boat. If you decide to march back to that saloon and turn yourself in to the Marshal, I am walking beside you. I am not going to argue with you about staying, because that is your right. You are the oldest thing you have. But wherever you go, I go. That is the deal. Josiah's face broke. Really broke. This time, not the fortress, the child. He fell forward, into her. 6 years of held-in 9-year-old grief hit her at once. His small hands fisted in the front of her dress, his face buried against her shoulder, and he cried the way people cry only after they have decided, in some small part of themselves, that it is safe to. She held him. She rocked slightly, not because she had planned to, because he was crying, and her body remembered how to hold a crying child, even though she had not held one in 6 years. It came back, like an old song. She did not tell him it would be all right, because she did not know if it would be, but she was there, and she was not going, and after a long time he stopped shaking, and after a longer time he lifted his head, and he said the smallest thing, Mama Prue. That was all. He had never called her anything before, not once in 5 months. He said it, and then he did not look at her, and he wiped his face on his sleeve, and he got up, and he closed his canvas bag, and he put it back under his bed. He walked past her. He went out into the main room. Ren on the floor looked up. Josiah. What? You were crying. No, I wasn't. You were. I got dirt in my eyes. Oh. Ren went back to her drawing. Prudence sat on the floor of the children's room for another minute. Just her, alone. She put her hand to her mouth. She let herself for 8 seconds sit there and be undone. Then she got up. She went to the door. She walked out. She started supper. Because that was the thing about mothers, real ones, or the ones who become real. The moment cracks you open, and the next moment you have to close and go into the kitchen and put the water on. Elias came in from the woodpile that evening. He looked at Josiah, who was setting the table without being asked which was new. He looked at Prudence. He raised his eyebrows. Later, she said quiet. He nodded, because that was the thing about husbands, real ones, or the ones who become real. They learn quickly when a woman means later. That night when the children were asleep, Prudence told him what had happened at the creek, what Vincent had said, what Josiah had almost done. She thought Elias would rage. He did not. He sat by the fire, very still, for a very long time. Then he said, Blackwood is not going to stop with words. No, he is going to hurt one of us. Yes, we have to go to Miss Adeline. Yes. Tomorrow. He looked at her. His face in the firelight was not the face of the man who had walked into Duke's Post 6 months ago. It was older. and also strangely younger, as if some hard part of him had softened and some soft part of him had gone hard. Prudence. Yes. Whatever Miss Adeline has to say to us, I want you to know something first. All right. I am not selling this land. I know. I am not selling this land, but I would sell it in a minute if I thought it kept them safe. You have to know that. I would sell it in a minute. She looked at him. I know. Which one is right? Elias. Which one? Keep the land, or sell and go, I do not know. She reached across the small space between their chairs. She took his hand. The second time she had ever done that on purpose. We will find out tomorrow, she said. Together, together. The wind moved outside. The stove ticked. 2 children slept in the next room, and the mountain, which did not care about any of them, kept its long silence around the little cabin above Silver Creek. They rode down to Silver Creek the next morning, all 4 of them. Elias would not leave anybody at the cabin alone. Not now, not with Blackwood counting days somewhere down the valley. So the whole family went. Prudence beside Elias on the roan, Josiah on the mule, Wren in front of him with her wooden doll clutched to her chest. Silver Creek looked smaller than Prudence remembered, which was strange, because she had lived there 3 years. It should have looked exactly the same, except she had been a different woman when she lived there. So the town looked different too. That was how memory worked. It gave you back the size of the person you had been. They tied the horses behind Miss Adeline's shop. Not in front, Elias insisted. Not in front. Miss Adeline opened the back door before they knocked. She had been watching for them. She took one look at their 4 faces, and she said, Blackwood. Yes, Elias said. Come in. The shop was warm and smelled of lavender and cedar shavings. Bolts of fabric lined the walls in careful stacks. A cutting table stood in the middle. In the back corner was a small parlor with 2 chairs, a bench, and a fireplace burning low. Miss Adeline settled them all. She gave Wren a bowl of dried apples. She gave Josiah a whole tin of shortbread and told him to guard it with his life. She gave Elias and Prudence tea. Then she sat down across from them. She folded her hands. I have been waiting 40 years for somebody to walk in this door and ask me to help them fight Cyrus Blackwood. Miss Adeline, let me get through this, because I will not get through it twice. She looked into the fire. I have kept a journal since I was 20. Not a diary, a journal. Different thing. Diaries are for a woman's own heart. Journals are for the world's records. I keep every name, every date, every conversation of any importance that has been had inside these walls. She looked up. This town has come to my shop for 44 years. Wives come to be measured. Daughters come for wedding dresses. Servants come for their mistresses. Everybody talks to a seamstress because a seamstress is invisible. She is on her knees measuring your hem. She does not count. So people say things in front of her they would never say in a courtroom. Cyrus Blackwood, Prudence said. Cyrus Blackwood. Miss Adeline reached down beside her chair. She lifted a leather satchel. She set it on the small table between them. She opened it. Inside were journals, not 1, not 2, a stack, 10 of them, each bound in worn leather, each with a year and a range of months penciled on the spine. Every family Cyrus Blackwood has run off this range in 20 years. The Henleys in 1856, the Prentices in 1861, the Wattses in 1863, the Carmodys and the Delaneys in 1867, the Fentons this April, and 2 others I know about but cannot yet prove. It is in here, all of it, every name, every date, every piece of paper he forged, every Marshal he bought, every well he poisoned that a family drank from before they finally packed up and left. Elias made a small sound. You knew, I knew, for 20 years. For 20 years, and you did nothing. I did what I could do. Miss Adeline said it quiet. I wrote it down. That was what I could do, which is a small thing, and I have carried the shame of that small thing every night for 20 years. Miss Adeline, Prudence, you were one woman. I was one woman with a shop and a journal, which is not nothing, but is not what those families needed. She looked at the fire again. 15 years ago, I did try. Once. There was a marshal in this town named Elgin. Good man, he listened to me. He believed me. He took my testimony down. He said he was going to ride up to Fort Bridger and open a formal inquiry. She paused. He never got to Fort Bridger. His horse came back 3 days later. He did not. His body was found in April at the bottom of a ravine off the Cutter Trail. It was called an accident. I never called it that. Elias closed his eyes. So you stopped, Prudence said. Soft. I stopped. Miss Adeline, I am not proud of it, but I did not want to be a body at the bottom of a ravine, so I kept my mouth shut and I kept writing things down because I told myself, one day someone will come along who is strong enough to carry it to a courtroom, and I will still be alive, and I will hand it to them. She looked at Prudence. I did not know it would be you. Prudence's throat closed. Miss Adeline, I am not strong. Child, the old woman's eyes were very steady. You are the strongest woman who has walked into this shop in 40 years. You just do not know it yet, because strength does not always feel like strength from the inside. From the inside, it usually feels like you are the last person standing, and someone has forgotten to tell you that you are allowed to sit down. Elias put his hand on Prudence's knee. She did not pull away. She turned to Miss Adeline. What do we do? We take these journals to Judge Whitfield. Judge Whitfield in Fort Bridger. Yes, he is the only judge in this territory Cyrus Blackwood has not been able to buy, because he is 81 years old and he does not want anything except to die honest, which is a very useful trait in a judge. Elias, he will hear us. He will hear me, which is a different thing. He and I are old. We knew each other before either of us was old. I have been waiting to spend my last favor with Abram Whitfield on the right cause, and it is time. She stood, slow, her knees popped. I will write to him this afternoon. Elias, you will take the letter tomorrow. You will ride down. You will put it in his hand, not in the hand of any deputy, his hand. Yes, ma'am. And Prudence. Yes, you are going to give a deposition in his court about what your husband and I are going to tell you tonight about the parents of these 2 children. Wren in the corner with her apples looked up at the mention of her parents and went back to her apples. Josiah with his shortbread did not go back to his shortbread. He was listening. Miss Adeline, Prudence said. Yes. What about their parents? Miss Adeline sat down again. She looked at Elias. He does not know. He does not know. You have not told him. Elias's face was very quiet. I did not know until I got your letter last month, and then I did not know how to tell my wife, because it changes everything. Prudence looked from one of them to the other. Elias, "The wagon," he said it low. "In Redstone Canyon, Josiah's mother and father, they did not die of fever." Elias. "They died of fever, that is true, but they did not die because fever visited a healthy family in a wagon on a road. They died because they had been on the road for 3 months, because Cyrus Blackwood had run them off their land in March, and they had been living out of that wagon since, trying to get back east to family. And by January, they were too broken and too cold and too tired, and when the fever came, it took them because they had nothing left in them to fight it." Prudence sat still. Josiah at the other end of the room was completely silent. Miss Adeline continued, gentle. She was speaking to Josiah now, not to Prudence. She had known Josiah was listening. She had wanted him to be. "Your ma's name was Alma," she said. Josiah's face broke just at the edges. "Your pa was Wendell. They had a small place on the west slope, 12 acres. A creek ran through it that Cyrus Blackwood wanted very badly. Your pa said no 6 times. Then Cyrus Blackwood sent men to run his fences down, then to poison his well, then to burn his barn. Your ma and pa took you and Wren and put you in the wagon in March because they had nowhere else to go. That is why they were on that road." Josiah did not move. "They did not leave you, Josiah. They fought for you. Every mile of that road, they fought." Josiah's shortbread tin sat on his lap, untouched. Prudence stood up. She went to him. She sat on the bench beside him. She did not touch him. She put her hand on the bench between them. He put his small hand on top of hers. They sat like that. Wren came over and climbed into Prudence's lap, not because she understood, because she felt the weather change in the room and knew whose lap to be in when weather changed. Elias across the parlor looked at his family. He said one word, "Whitfield." Miss Adeline nodded. "Whitfield." Elias rode to Fort Bridger the next morning. He did not go alone. Duke Halloran of Duke's Post went with him, because Duke, when the story had been told to him in a back room of his saloon over strong coffee, had set down his bar rag and said only one thing, "Time somebody said it out loud." The 2 men rode hard, 60 miles in a day and a half. They slept one night in a livery stable in a nothing town called Cross Keys, because Duke would not spend $1 on an inn when he could spend a dime on hay. They rode into Fort Bridger at noon on a Thursday. Judge Abram Whitfield lived above a hardware store. He heard Elias out for 3 hours in a small office lined with law books. He asked 47 questions. He wrote nothing down. He drank 3 cups of black tea. He said very little. At the end of the 3 hours, he stood up, slow. He was 81, and every year of it lived hard. "Mr. Thorne, sir." Adeline Fairchild was the finest young woman in Wyoming Territory in 1836. She has apparently become the finest old woman, too. I have owed her a favor since I was 32 years old. I did not know what it would be, but she has told me in the letter you handed me that this is what it is. He put on his coat. "I will ride back with you in the morning." They came back 4 days later. They came back with Judge Abram Whitfield. An 81-year-old federal judge does not ride up a mountain trail in June for entertainment. He rode up because Miss Adeline had written him a letter that had said only, "Abram, it is time. Come." He rode up on a small gray horse that was as old as he was. He wore a black coat that had been brushed clean but had not been new since the Grant administration. He had a leather case tied behind his saddle. In that case were 4 blank subpoenas, a Bible, and a good pen. They set the court in Silver Creek 8 days later, not in Fort Bridger, in Silver Creek, because Judge Whitfield had said very quiet, "If we are going to try Cyrus Blackwood, we are going to try him in the town he thinks he owns. Otherwise, the trial does not mean anything." The town had never seen a trial like it. The whole valley came, miners from the Copperhead Cut, ranchers from the Eastern Grass, widows from the boarding houses, old men in wagons, children on their fathers' shoulders. They filled the meeting hall. They spilled out onto the boardwalk. They stood in the road, because in a territory where the same handful of men had run the same handful of games for 20 years, a court that had actually opened its doors was a spectacle. Judge Whitfield sat behind a table set up on a low stage. Cyrus Blackwood sat at another table with his Denver lawyer, a thin man in a good suit. Vincent Blackwood sat beside his father wearing a fresh coat, looking bored on purpose. Emmett and Rafe were behind him in the front row. Prudence sat at the plaintiff's table, not Elias. Prudence, because Judge Whitfield in his slow, gentle way had asked her the afternoon before, "Ma'am, are you willing to sit in the front seat of this thing?" "Sir, because it should be a woman. This case is about families being run off their land. It is about children left without parents. It is about widows with no recourse. That is a woman's case, not because a man cannot bring it, because a woman brings it more clearly." She had said yes. She had barely slept the night before, but she sat at that table now, in her mended gray dress, Miss Adeline's ring on her hand, her spine straight. Beside her on a bench sat Miss Adeline Fairchild, silver hair pulled tight, her lap full of 10 leather journals. Judge Whitfield banged his little wooden gavel. Once. "We are in session." The lawyer from Denver stood. "Your Honor, before we begin, my client would ask about the standing of the plaintiff. Mrs. Thorne is not a landowner in this territory. She has been resident in these mountains for less than a year. She has no direct injury to plead. This is a matter at most between her husband and my client. Perhaps we could excuse the wife." Judge Whitfield looked at the lawyer for a long moment. He had eyes like an old hawk. "Counselor, Your Honor, I have been on the bench 46 years. I have heard almost every objection a man can put together. That is not one of the good ones. Sit down." The lawyer sat down. "Mrs. Thorne, rise." Prudence rose. "Ma'am, state for the court in your own words why you are here today." Prudence looked at Judge Whitfield. She looked at the room. She looked at Cyrus Blackwood. He was smiling, very small, very confident. She thought, "Do not be brave, just be honest." She spoke. "Your Honor, my name is Prudence Merritt Thorne. I am the wife of Elias Thorne. I am the mother of a kind that mothers can be when the first mothers are gone of 2 children named Josiah and Wren. Their real mother was named Alma. Their real father was named Wendell. They died last winter in a wagon on the North Fork Road. They died because they had been driven off their land. They had been driven off their land by the man sitting in this room right now." She turned. She pointed. Her hand did not shake. "Cyrus Blackwood." The room did not make a sound. She kept going. "I am here today because Mr. Blackwood has now come to my door to make me the same offer he made Alma and Wendell, and because the woman beside me, Miss Adeline Fairchild, has kept for 40 years the record of every family he has done this to. I did not know any of these things when I married my husband. I know them now, and I cannot know them and be silent, because if I am silent, I have taken his coin as surely as if he had put it in my hand. She sat. Miss Adeline reached over and quiet took her hand. Judge Whitfield nodded once, just once. Miss Fairchild. Miss Adeline stood. She was small. She looked standing there like exactly what she was, a widow who had lived alone above a fabric shop for 40 years and stitched other women's wedding dresses and buried her own husband before she turned 21. Miss Fairchild, you have prepared testimony. I have your honor. Please proceed. She opened the first journal. She read the names of the Hendley family. She read the date. She read the account of the well. She read the exact words Cyrus Blackwood had said to Mrs. Henley one afternoon when she came in to buy black cloth to bury her husband, words Mrs. Henley had whispered, weeping to Miss Adeline while being measured, and Miss Adeline had gone into her back room and written down that same night. She read the Prentice account. She read the Watts account. She read the Carmody account. She read the Delaney account. She read the Fenton account. She read for 40 minutes. She read in a voice that did not shake, which was Prudence realized the most extraordinary part. Because Miss Adeline had been afraid of this man for 40 years, she had watched a good Marshal die because she once had the courage to try. She had lived in the same small town as him ever since. She had measured his wife for dresses. She had cut cloth for his daughter's christening. She had smiled at him on the boardwalk. And underneath all of it, every night, for 20 years, she had written. Cyrus Blackwood's smile faded very slowly across those 40 minutes. By the end of it, it was gone. Miss Adeline closed the last journal. She set it on the table. She looked up at Judge Whitfield. Your Honor, I have one more thing to say. Say it. Marshal Elgin, 15 years ago, in my judgment, did not die by accident. The room did not breathe. I do not have proof. I have never had proof. I speak here of what I believe, not of what I can show. But there are 2 men in this town who rode out with Cyrus Blackwood the same afternoon Marshal Elgin left for Fort Bridger, and they are in this room today. I would like the court to note their names in the record, so that if anything happens to me or to Mrs. Thorne or to any of the children in her household in the next 6 months, some judge somewhere will know where to look. Their names are Otis Coke and Job Peavy. They are the 2 men in the back row wearing the tan coats. 2 men in the back row moved, to stand, to leave. Judge Whitfield banged his gavel. Sit. They sat. The Denver lawyer stood again. Your Honor, this is hearsay. This is a woman with a personal grievance. This is not. Counselor, Your Honor, you are correct that some of this is her opinion, which is why I will not be trying your client for the death of Marshal Elgin today, which is why I will not be trying your client for the deaths of Alma and Wendell in that wagon today, because those cases will take a year each to build, and I do not have a year. I am 81. He looked at Cyrus Blackwood. I have you today, Mr. Blackwood, on land fraud, on 6 counts of it, which I have looked into for the last 2 weeks with the help of the Fort Bridger clerk who is here in the room, who has brought your original filings, which do not match your deeds, which is the tidy little end of a very large piece of rot, sir, and that will be enough for me to send you to the territorial prison at Laramie for a very long time. He banged his gavel. You are remanded, Cyrus Blackwood, pending sentencing. Deputies, take him." Two men Judge Whitfield had brought up from Fort Bridger, wearing federal stars, stepped forward. Vincent Blackwood stood. "You cannot." "Sit down, son. You cannot take my father on that woman's." "Sit down, son, or you will sit in the cell beside him, which I am not opposed to. I have a spare pair of irons in my saddlebag, and I have watched you all morning. You have your father's face and none of his patience. You are the more dangerous of the two. Do not test me." Vincent sat, slowly. Cyrus Blackwood did not fight. He stood and he brushed his coat and he looked once at Miss Adeline Fairchild. And Miss Adeline did not look away. She held his eye until the deputies put their hands on his elbows and turned him toward the door. He walked out of the meeting hall between two federal deputies, his silver head still up, but smaller than he had walked in, as if the room had taken back some of the space he had been renting from it for 20 years. The room let out its breath. The people cheered, not politely. They cheered, and Judge Whitfield banged his gavel 3 times and yelled that this was still a courtroom, and everybody quieted down. But the room had already turned. Cyrus Blackwood had walked in as the man who owned this town. He had walked out as a man being taken to prison, which was in the arithmetic of a small territorial town, exactly how history is made. The 3 sons walked out into the road afterward. Nobody spoke to them. Nobody moved out of their way either, which was worse. Emmett and Rafe kept their eyes on the ground. Vincent kept his eyes up. He was looking at faces, cataloging, deciding. Judge Whitfield saw it too. He called Vincent Blackwood in that same afternoon. He held the boy in a small back room for 1 hour. He did not raise his voice. He talked to Vincent as if Vincent were already an old man looking back on his life and Judge Whitfield were reading it out loud to him. He gave Vincent one warning and one only. "Son, your father will be in Laramie for 20 years if he lives that long, which he will not. Do not spend the next 20 years finishing what he started, because if I hear that one member of this family from Josiah down to the smallest cousin has been touched, I will come for you personally. And I am 81's son. I do not fear dying anymore, which makes me the worst kind of enemy a young man can have. Do you hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Say it again like you mean it." "Yes, sir, I hear you." "Get out of my sight." Vincent Blackwood left Silver Creek 2 weeks later. He went west. Some said Oregon, some said further. He did not come back. Not that year, not the next, not ever as far as anyone in Silver Creek would know. Emmett married a rancher's daughter down valley and became a quieter man than his father had ever thought possible. Rafe, the youngest, the jumpy one, joined the Pinkertons and was killed at 26 trying to break up a train robbery in Nevada, which was, everyone agreed, the closest thing to redemption a Blackwood son had ever managed. There were, of course, still consequences. Judge Whitfield stayed in Silver Creek for another week. He sat up in the back of Miss Adeline's shop and heard case after case, land claims that had been in limbo for years, wells that had been poisoned, fences that had been moved. He wrote orders. He signed papers. He restored a piece of the map family by family in his slow, patient old hand. The Fenton land was restored to the Fentons, wherever they were. A letter went east. The Carmody land was awarded to the Carmody widow, who was 72 and living in Kansas with her sister. And on the 9th day, Judge Whitfield called Elias and Prudence into the back room of the seamstress shop, and he sat them down. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, sir, I am about to say something that I would like you both to think very carefully about before you answer. Yes, sir. He opened a folder. Alma and Wendell had a small parcel, 12 acres, on the west slope of the range, a good creek, a meadow, a stand of pine. I have restored that parcel today. It belongs by law to their next of kin, which is Josiah and Wren. Prudence looked at Elias. Sir, Elias said, they are 8 and 5, which is why the court appoints a guardian. 2 in this case, whom the court has already selected, if you both accept. Elias's mouth open, closed. Prudence spoke. We accept. Mrs. Thorne, we accept, sir. Elias nodded, slow. His throat worked. We accept, sir. Judge Whitfield handed them the papers. Now, there is a second question, because that parcel is worth some money, not a fortune, but enough to matter, and it is legally the children's. It is possible for you as guardians to sell that parcel now on their behalf and hold the money in trust for them until they come of age. Sir, Prudence said, that is their mother and father's land. It is. Then we are not selling it. Ma'am, we are not selling it, sir. When Josiah is grown, if he wants to sell it, he can sell it. When Wren is grown, if she wants to sell it, she can sell it. Until then, that land sits. It sits, and it waits for them. And we tell them about it every year, on their birthdays. This is your ma's land. This is your pa's land. It is yours. Someday you will decide what to do with it. Elias was looking at her. She did not look at him, because if she looked at him, she was going to lose her steady voice. Judge Whitfield's old face moved into something that was almost a smile. Mrs. Thorne, yes, that is a good answer. He signed the papers. Mr. Thorne, congratulations. You have doubled the size of your family's land holding today. Try not to do anything foolish with it. No, sir. And Mrs. Thorne, yes, sir. Miss Fairchild is a very dear friend of mine. Please look in on her from time to time when you can. She is not as young as she used to be, and she carried something very heavy for a very long time. Sometimes when a person sets a heavy thing down, they discover they were partly held up by it. She will need her people. Yes, sir, she will have us. Good. Then this court is done in Silver Creek. May God have mercy on us all. He signed one last paper. He put down the pen. He looked up. He smiled properly for the first time in a week. Now, I would very much like some of Miss Fairchild's tea, and I understand there is shortbread. There was shortbread. Josiah had guarded the tin all through the trial. He gave the last piece to the judge, solemn as a small officer of the court, and the judge accepted it with the same solemnity and shook his hand. Josiah, for the rest of his life, would remember the weight of an 81-year-old federal judge's hand around his own. Not many 9-year-olds get to remember a thing like that. The wedding was the next spring, not the wedding in Duke's Post. That one had been legal. This was the other kind, the kind for the family. Reverend Coleman came up to the meadow above the cabin. Duke Halloran came. Judge Whitfield could not travel by then, but he sent a letter that Miss Adeline read aloud, which made Prudence cry into her sleeve. Miss Adeline came in a lavender dress she had made herself and had been saving in a box for 40 years because she had never had a proper wedding of her own to wear it to. Josiah walked Prudence down the small grassy aisle. He was 10 now. He had grown 4 inches over the winter. His voice had started to do that thing where it broke in the middle of words. He held her arm with the seriousness of a much older man. Wren scattered wildflower petals. Because a 5-year-old must scatter petals. It is a rule of the universe. She was 6 by then and no longer quite a baby, but she still scattered petals like a baby because she wanted to. Elias stood at the front in a clean shirt. He was crying, not sobbing, just quietly, the way a big man cries when a big thing has finally settled in him. Prudence took his hands. Reverend Coleman said the words that were the same words as any wedding, and then because it was that kind of wedding, Elias added something not in the book. He looked at Prudence, he looked at Josiah on her right and Wren on her left. He said, "I promised you I would be kind. You did. I have tried. I will keep trying. I know. That is the whole thing. That is all I have to say." Prudence smiled. She said, "That is the whole thing." She kissed him. For the first time in almost a year and a half of marriage, right there in a meadow, with Josiah and Wren and Miss Adeline and Duke and Reverend Coleman and 8 or 9 mountain neighbors watching. Wren said loud, "Ew," which was another rule of the universe, and which broke the whole meadow into laughter. That night, Elias moved his blankets off the floor by the stove. He did not ask. She did not offer. He carried them across the room and set them at the foot of her bed, and he lay down there still on the floor, because he was still a mountain man who did not know how to sleep on a mattress after 19 years of frozen ground and would not for another 6 months. But 6 months from that night he would, and after that he would not sleep anywhere else again, which was another quiet thing, which was in its way the second wedding. Miss Adeline moved up to a little house Elias built for her at the edge of the clearing that fall. She kept her shop in town 2 days a week, but she came up more and more and stayed longer and eventually did most of her sewing at the little house with Wren on the floor beside her learning stitches. She had at 61 become a grandmother in the way that mattered, which was not by blood, which was by choice, which was by being the one who was always there. She lived 7 more years. They were, she told Prudence one afternoon, the best 7 years of her life. She said it while she was stitching a christening gown for a child that did not exist yet, but that she was making anyway, because Wren was 10 and would want one someday for someone. Miss Adeline liked to be ahead of the future when she could. She died peacefully, in her sleep, in her little house with the pine trees around it. Wren at 13 was the one who found her. She sat with her a while, then she came and got Prudence, and Prudence washed Miss Adeline's face and hands, and Wren helped, and they buried Miss Adeline in the meadow where the wedding had been. Elias carved her stone. Wren wanted the stone to say something. She thought about it for a week. She decided on this. She waited a long time. She did not wait alone, which was not standard grave carving, which was better than standard grave carving. Miss Adeline's journals, which she had left to Prudence in a will drawn up by Judge Whitfield the year before he died, went into a wooden box under the bed. Prudence kept adding to them, not the same kind, but the same book. She wrote down every conversation of importance she had, every small injustice she witnessed, every family she saw in trouble, because it turned out that was the kind of woman Prudence Merritt Thorne had become, which was maybe the biggest twist of all, that the widow who had come out of Silver Creek to die had become without meaning to the keeper of the town's real records. Josiah grew tall. He grew tall the way Elias was tall, not by blood, by example. He had spent so many years walking a step behind that man that his own body had learned the walk. He grew into a young man who was quiet and careful, who thought before he spoke, who was gentle with animals and with women and with children, who never raised his voice unless it was for something worth raising it for. He courted a girl from the eastern slope named Rebecca. She was the daughter of a family who had come out after the Blackwood cases had been settled and had been able to make a life on land that would have been sold out from under them a decade before. They married when Josiah was 19. Prudence cried the whole ceremony. She could not help it. She sat between Elias and Ren and cried like a woman who had not thought she was going to be a mother of the groom, which she had not thought, which was why she cried. Josiah, at the front of the church, before he took Rebekah's hand, looked at his bride. He said, "I will be kind to you, I promise," because that had been in his ears since he was 9, because that was the vow that had built his house, because that had been the question his mother had asked her mountain man in a saloon in the winter of 1874, before he was old enough to remember, and that answer had made a whole family. Rebecca said, "I know you will," which is the answer you say if you already know you have chosen well. Ren went east to school. She was 16 when she went. She went to a normal school in Iowa. Prudence's sister, who had spent 6 years grieving, a sister she thought had disappeared and who had 3 years earlier received a letter that had made her sit down and cry in her kitchen for an hour, put her up. She studied to be a teacher. She wrote long letters home. She came back 3 years later with a certificate and a stubborn chin and a plan to teach the children of Silver Creek in a schoolhouse that did not yet exist. She built it. She got Elias and Josiah and Duke Halloran and half the town to raise the walls. She taught for the next 40 years. 2 generations of Silver Creek children learned to read at her feet, and every single one of them, whether they knew it or not, was taught something else that had nothing to do with letters. They were taught by a woman who, as a little girl in a wagon in the snow, had almost been swallowed by a system that did not want her, and who had been saved instead by a mountain man who wept in a saloon, and a widow who asked him one question, and an old seamstress who kept 10 leather journals, and a judge who was 81 years old and had wanted to die honest. Ren married late, 28, a young lawyer named Silas who came out from Chicago to work on a railroad claim and stayed because Ren, as she was famous for saying, would not be moved from her schoolhouse for love or money, and I chose love. Their first daughter was born when Ren was 30. She named her Adeline. Of course she did. Elias died at 68. It was a Thursday. In October, the aspens were yellow along the ridge. He was on the porch. He was whittling. His hands at the end were not shaking. They were just slower. Everything about him had gotten slower for the last 5 years, which had not been a bad thing, which had let Prudence catch up. She was 62. She was mending a blanket on the porch beside him. She had felt his hand go still on the little block of pine. She looked over. He was smiling at her. He said, "Prudence." "Yes, thank you." "For what?" "For asking me a question that night, because it saved me, and you never even knew that, so I wanted to say it once." Elias, just once. His eyes closed. He did not open them again. Prudence sat with him on that porch for a long time. She did not go get anybody. She did not cry yet. She sat with him. She watched the aspens. Later she would cry. Later she would be almost undone. Later, she would be all right again because she had a house full of grandchildren and a Wren and a Josiah and a Rebecca and 8 little bodies who were going to need her. But right then, just right then, she sat with him. She said quiet to the mountain, he was kind. Every day he kept his word, which was a small eulogy, which was the truest one anybody ever gave him. She lived 16 more years after Elias died. 16 years of grandchildren spilling in and out of the cabin. 16 years of teaching Wren's oldest and then her second and then her third how to knead bread. 16 years of watching Josiah become the kind of father Elias had been to him. 16 years of Silver Creek slowly changing into a proper town with a library and a bank that was not run by a Blackwood and a wide dirt street that ran up to the cemetery where Elias and Miss Adeline and eventually Judge Whitfield, when he was moved home, all lay together in the meadow above the cabin. She lived to see Wren's schoolhouse become the largest school in the county. She lived to see her granddaughter Adeline grow from a baby into a fierce, curly-headed girl who followed her grandmother everywhere. On the last night of her life, Prudence was 78 years old. She was on the porch. Little Adeline, age 7, was sitting on her lap. Adeline's mother was Wren. Her hair was as blonde as her mother's had been at the same age. She had the fierce curiosity that jumps a generation and lands where it wants. The sun was down. The stove inside was warm. Rebecca was in the kitchen. Wren was reading by the window. Josiah was down at the barn. The house was full of the small sounds of a family at its evening. Little Adeline looked up. "Grandmama." "Yes, sweet pea." "How did you know Grandpapa was a good man?" Prudence smiled. She looked out at the meadow where the aspens were going gold again, the way they did every October. She said, "I asked him a question." "What question?" Prudence thought about the answer. She thought about a mountain man in a saloon in 1874, crying in front of a room of laughing men with 2 orphans up at his cabin and 7 hours to save them. She thought about her own hand on that day, still wearing the ring of a woman who had understood everything before Prudence understood any of it. She thought about Josiah asking her once in the dark of a bedroom how long it would take him to trust her, and about her answer, which had been years, and about the fact that it had taken exactly the number of years. She had said no more and no less. She thought about her husband on the last morning she had of him on this same porch saying thank you. She looked at little Adeline. She did not tell the child the whole question, not yet, because that question is heavy, and a child of 7 should meet a question like that only when she has lived enough to know what it is really asking. Instead, Prudence Merritt Thorne, at 78, sitting on the porch of the cabin above Silver Creek, said the simple part: be kind to everybody, all the time, even when it costs you something, especially when it costs you something. That's it. That's it. That's the whole question. That's the whole answer. Little Adeline thought about that. But what was the question, though? Prudence smiled. "Ask me again in 20 years, sweetheart, and I will tell you." Little Adeline sighed, the sigh of a 7-year-old who has been given a promise she cannot yet collect. She put her head against her grandmother's shoulder. They sat there, the 2 of them, the old woman and the small one. Above them the stars came out. Below them the meadow was quiet, and somewhere down the trail towards Silver Creek the wind moved through the aspens, which had been there 100 years already, and would be there 100 years yet. Prudence closed her eyes. She thought, well, Elias, I have kept the whole promise. Every day I have been kind, she smiled. And the mountain, which never cared about any of them and never would, kept its long, patient, forgiving silence around them, the same silence it had kept the night an old woman handed a widow a ring in a saloon, the same silence it had kept the morning a 9-year-old boy with a canvas bag decided not to run, the same silence it had kept over 4 graves in a meadow. It was a good silence. It was the kind of silence a family makes when there is no more to say, when everybody has been kept, when everybody has been kind, when the question, however small, has finally been answered by an entire life, which is in the end the only way that question ever gets answered at all. Not in a saloon, not in a courtroom, not in a wedding, but in the 7 decades of small, ordinary days that follow, one after another, kind, and then kind, and then kind again, until a whole life of it has been lived, and a child on your knee looks up in a good silence, on a good porch, in a good place, and asks the next question,